Cinemology.
Acid is a short indie film from The Three Lancers. Published to YouTube on the 22nd of April 2016, this film is a look into British gang culture in the 80s, accompanied by, of course, fitting music and visuals. The film starts with an interesting montage that showcases not only the feeling and tone of the film, but sets the time for the film well without shoving it directly in the viewer's face. We also get a feeling of what is to come in terms of style. Colour grading is the main thing that really jumps out here, with the environments, in the urban setting anyway, often feeling somewhat bleak, contrasting with some of the more nature-focused locales, which are, by contrast, bursting with colour. The main character here, Alex, played by Michael Harrison, is also signified with his astonishingly bright red jacket, something which will come to characterise him throughout the short 15-minute runtime of this film. The cinematography in this section is also fairly impressive, as throughout the rest of the film, well, for the most part. The Three Lancers clearly have practiced their craft for a while, and that shows in their style and composition of these opening shots, something which is fortunately consistent throughout mostly the rest of the film.
Not again with the 6-day sequence.
Everything was looking normal as watching the main engine control program.
The first speaking scene introduces us to the gang and the characters of Snide, played by Charlie Humber Thomas, Luther, played by Andrew Hollands, Bruiser, played by Jake Bentley, and Slick, played by John Strawston. This is possibly one of the most important scenes to set up what is to come, especially given this is a short film, though it kind of ends up, well, I'll let you take a look.
Oi kid, it's your ball.
Yeah, sorry mate.
You hit me, you dick.
Calm down, Snide. He's apologised. Just give him the ball back.
Sure.
Fucking do that again!
Yeah, the acting is, well, let's be honest, it's fairly stiff and unnatural. Now, I will give a little bit of leeway here. The Three Lancers did state in the description of the film that this was more of a side project whilst focusing on another film, and they weren't initially going to release this one because they felt it was awkward and unfinished. However, they did release it. Whilst I can definitely understand the reasoning behind that, nobody wants to waste their time and, importantly, footage. I believe every piece of work should be as close as possible to the standard you adhere to, and the acting in the scene, and unfortunately throughout most of the film, is again quite stiff and unnatural, with later scenes descending into basically sheer hilarity in a so bad it's good kind of way, which is clearly not the vibe the Three Lancers actually intended with this film. So, after earning his respect from beating up Snide, Alex and the gang venture off and encounter some drug dealers who've wronged them, setting up a way for Alex to be tested by the group. He is sent to deal with the issue by, well...
Can't believe he's actually doing it.
He's fucking savage, he makes me feel he's nothing special.
You're only saying like he's bad, you.
Fuck off. Don't be snidey.
He's one of us.
Now, whilst this fight scene is undeniably awkward, especially with the lack of music, which could have actually made the scene a bit more energetic, Michael Harrison's performance here is actually quite a bit better than his earlier fight with Snide. He clearly knows how to make it look like he's actually fighting, and the weight behind his movements and his overall body language is quite convincing, and it comes up for a decent performance. Keeping the camera at a distance is quite a smart move to cover some of the flaws that could have occurred during the scene, whilst also avoiding the common action trope of repeated fast cuts. This scene, whilst having no real atmosphere to it and is fairly spoilt by the interjection by the gang where it cuts back and they have a conversation, it's well acted, it is well acted. This leads up to the setup for the gang splitting up after arranging to attend a party later, with Alex seeming somewhat concerned by the activities he's just engaged in.
Alright, see you in a bit, boys.
Alex heads home to find a note from his mum congratulating him for attending his first therapy session, something which was alluded to with a note in the first scene of the film. This would be a good scene to imply Alex's aggression in the previous scene as his own personal therapy. If the camera work wasn't so damn shaky, handheld camera is not a bad thing at all, but for reading such fine detail like this note, a tripod is almost a must. Not to mention that the film grain overlay makes it even harder to read the extremely thin writing. The note worked in the opening sequence because it was quite big letters that you could clearly read therapy, and the camera was fairly stable, whereas this scene, you have to pause it to read it, which proves problematic, and it definitely breaks the immersion of the film. It really wouldn't be too hard to have her write something in marker and leave it on the fridge or something, so why not just do that? Anyway, Alex changes clothes and leaves his house, meeting with the gang later on in the woods, with Slick arriving just after with some acid tabs. Alex has also brought the tape player with him, a good way to give the music in the scene a grounding in the film's universe, which is never really done again in the movie, it's just this one time. I appreciate the effort anyway. The gang take their pills, seemingly immediately affected by them, though Bruce's performance here is frankly laughable, with Snide looking completely uninterested during the start of his trip. Anyway, Alex blacks out and wakes up later, thus earning him the nickname of Acid, a mockery of his inability to handle his narcotics.
On 3, 2, 1.
Snide then, for, well, no real discernible reason, starts to act up and ends up getting a right rollicking from Luther. Again, Andrew Holland knows how to throw a convincing punch, but the aftermath is so stale and awkward from both their performances that Snide's reaction and Luther's little rant has no real impact. Bruiser then provides some backstory exposition of Snide often causing conflict, and how Luther started the gang for protection from other local gangs. He also gives some explanation for the nicknames, which actually suit them fairly well. During this exposition, Luther and Slick head off to apparently get some stuff, but only Luther returns with nothing, clearly just an excuse for them to leave the scene for this one-on-one.
Don't use that fucking name, you useless piece of shit. This is my gang, I say what fucking goes. Acid's one of us, now get out of my fucking sight. Right, Slick, let's go, we need to get our stuff.
Snide returns shortly afterwards with a gun, Luther looking almost amused by the situation. Charlie Humber Thomas's performance here could have been so much better. He looks completely unthreatening, which, given, may be why Luther looks amused, but the line delivery is, well, it's borderline comedy, and it really doesn't suit the scene at all. It holds no real serious weight to it.
A beating?
I'd like to see you try. Not another step.
What the fuck? I'll give you one chance to put that gun down or I'll beat you to death.
You don't get to call the shots here. I'm the one with the fucking gun.
Put the gun down now!
I will shoot you. I swear I'll do it.
You don't have the balls!
I'll fucking shoot you.
Go on then!
I will!
Do it!
I'll shoot you!
Shoot me then!
Anyway, after being talked into relinquishing the gun, Snide backs up and falls over a log, shooting Bruiser, causing him to spit out some extremely unconvincing blood, while Snide runs away like a chubby toddler. Acid and Luther run off to chase Snide, with Slick still absolutely nowhere to be seen for this scene or indeed the rest of the film. Catching up to him in the field, Luther and Acid proceed to beat Snide up, again with some pretty decent choreography for the most part, which is unfortunately ruined by the terribly unrealistic blood, awful line delivery, and a quick degradation into some absolutely awful choreography for no real apparent reason, probably just to try and convey some sort of brutality to the fight, though all the impact is lost just by the sheer hilarity of some of the choreography. I mean, it's supposed to be a fight, not, you know, WWE or UFC. You don't need a finishing move as such. Anyway, Luther does eventually pick up the gun and shoots Snide dead in a scene that is, well, it's fairly convincing with the special effects, I must say. It's ironic that the earlier fight scene would have benefited from some music, yet had none, but this scene could have been fine with some better sound effects and absolutely no music, but they used music anyway, and not one that actually terribly fit the scene well.
You deserve this.
In the final scene, Luther tells Alex he's hid the body of Snide and that he'll see him later, with Alex contemplating what he's seen and done that day atop the hill. The credits then roll into some quite upbeat music, completely ruining any chance of atmosphere and reflection in the film, and somewhat, well, epitomising the film as it performed throughout, building up to something and then having the payoff completely ruined through either bad acting, shoddy sound design, or just a general lack of guidance. Acid could have been a damn good indie film, but failed to capitalise on the opportunities to build more character and more conflict, something which was blocked every time by stale performances. The story was generally unenthralling, holding no real weight or tension, and doing nothing but to loosely guide the film through the motions. Cinematography ended up being consistently good throughout, with colour grading making the film visually look quite good. Again, it's just a shame that performances and the general lack of guidance and care with the production, for the most part, blocked any payoff and sense of satisfaction the film could have had. For me, Acid gets a 3 out of 10. The story really held no water, and the performances were lacklustre for the most part, but the cinematography and colour grading was outstanding for the most part, save for, the one or two slip-ups. The Three Lancers clearly have an idea of what they want to do with their productions, it's just a shame that Acid never followed through.